Okay, with Bryan Cote, The British Bulldogs is the feature film played at the Documentary Film Festival, a film about addiction. But before I start, I want to ask you, what is the Behavioral Health Hour? That's the organization that made this film.
Yeah, it's a journal I started in right after Columbine, 1998, on mental health, kind of the interconnectivity of sports, mental health, the science of why we do what we do, our behaviors. So I was a columnist for a lot of years in newspapers, so started that and I still publish it today. So that's the like unofficial the film was sort of that it made from that journal and a story that I did about the Boston Bulldogs about a year or two ago.
And this is your first ever film? This is your first film?
Oh yeah, I mean I'm a reporter journalist by training, still do that today. Um, I write a column every week. So the idea of doing a film or a movie or a documentary was a bit like always something I'd want to, but quite foreign. Like the idea of putting pieces together on a story is a lot easier than in a movie. But did it with my son who has some of that capability and interest.
Yeah.
So that made it a little bit easier. And this was an easy story to tell.
So that's Brian Richard. So your son's Brian Richard Cote?
I'm Brian and my son is Jack
Jack Cote.
Cote.
Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, I'm just looking
Yeah,
because you
no,
have
all
different
good.
credits on the writer director, but yeah, okay, gotcha.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, we started I went up to Boston, Massachusetts when I heard about this organization that basically was a group of people trying to be in a sober community
Okay.
and recover from addiction. And I kind of just inserted myself into the weekly run that they do
Yeah.
very anonymously, and people were welcoming. I didn't even say that I was going to be doing a film or a story. And I did the 3 mile run with them. I'd call it a jog, and then kind of reached out to the organization to say I wanted to do
So there's a
that it lent
Boston
itself.
Bulldogs running club, right?
Yeah.
It still exists.
Still exists, about 10 years old this week. And the roots of it, which we hit on in the film, were
Mm.
really go back to about '07 when the founder, who'd himself been through addiction for much of his youth and teenage years, wanted to give back. And this idea of, running and with a community and then kind of being supportive. What's interesting is, Matthew, is there's a lot of people in that club who are not dealing with addiction. Maybe someone in their life
Yeah.
is, the power of that like community is pretty impressive.
So from a personal standpoint, I'm 18 years sober, and
Congrats.
I basically got into working out, and when I it was almost like a new addiction in a sense. Like I switched addictions. Of course, once you know what I mean, but it was like I'm
Uh,
not trying to like, yeah,
Of course. Of
yeah,
course. In fact, like when I was first thinking through the name of the film, I think I had in my head something like addiction to running. It's playing word. There's a lot of wordplay that you could do with it, and it's sure this is a healthier way to deal with what everybody has to deal with, which is a whole lot of change and challenges.
yeah.
It's what living is. So, congrats on that.
And then, but then I found that when I didn't work out for like a few days, the whatever you want to call it would come back. Like the kind of like the wanting to do drugs and etc. would
Yep.
come back. So,
Yeah.
but
You'd
then I
feel
had to
that.
find a
I could feel
balance
it.
because I knew that it wasn't like it was just it's been a process. It's like I knew that wasn't I needed to find a more balance because then that was it's intensity. I think with addiction is that you know way better than I do, but I think what happens is that there's a certain intensity. There's like a compulsion to do things. Like
A hundred percent.
that's the addictive personality like
Yeah.
comes from.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The main character, well, I say the main character in the film, she's a real person. Megan's her name. She talks exactly about what you said when
yeah,
she actually found running, but she went all in on it and did
yeah.
like a
Oh,
marathon.
I
And then,
related to her when I watched the film. Yeah,
yeah, right. And then she dropped off because she's like, that was all my eggs in one basket, right?
yeah.
That's very relatable.
100%. And so then, yeah, then you just got to find the balance because then, yeah, it's a process. It's like it's a cliche, but it's a daily process, right? So,
I agree.
okay, so you wanted to, so you did this film with your son. You never made films before. So, what was your kind of process? Did you kind of write, did you know it was going to be a feature? Did you write a script, like kind of like an outline of what things you wanted to touch on as a journalist? Like well, I was curious what your filmmaking process
Oh
was.
yeah. So I approached it just like I would if I was writing a story.
Yeah.
And most of it was filmed in a single day. There were a couple others, but basically showed up and I'm like, um, I'd like to go on a run and experience this and interview you. And then I'd like to interview maybe, I had heard her sister was involved in the club, talk to her about your past and that, and talk to your husband and like just take it like an interview, like I would if I was on the phone, like you and I are doing here. I
Hmm.
mean, as my roots are in community newspapers, so like you'd show up at a school meeting or a local club or a sporting event or an accident scene, and
Yeah.
I would have my notebook, and that's kind of how what I did. What I've learned now since I'm watching like a lot of documentaries is like there's this seamless interviewers not involved. There's a lot of like old footage.
Yeah.
It's very neat and clean and kind of guides people through something that's familiar to them. This I like approached only because it's the only way I knew how to do it, which was like I'm
Yeah.
gonna just like ask questions. And what then I found when we went through editing, which that took like a year, was like, uh-oh, I'm involved in like every single like piece, and sometimes I'm interjecting, and it was going to be too difficult to like, parse that out.
Yeah.
So we made the decision to kind of just flow the story. We moved some things around given the main character Megan was became pregnant during that time and just we wanted to make sure it was clear and easy to follow from that vantage point. But I don't know. In hindsight, I did it the way I did a story. If
Hmm.
I did it again, I'm not sure. I maybe would do it somewhat differently and not be so like integrated in the
Are
film.
you going to do it again?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. I think I need to get, we're gonna myself, maybe my son a little bit, if I can get him to come to go to schools and different communities across the country and talk about the film and do some like education and almost like Boston Bulldogs running club across America kind of thing.
Yeah.
And play that through because I think there's a lot of positive messages from the film. And then pursue maybe something else, another kind of story that I feel connected to.
But there's a theme with your stories though, right? Like you're very much in like I said, like your website, you're very much into like depression, like addiction, like why, like you said, like as you touched on in the beginning, like why we are who we are, and like with like mentors, proteges, teenagers, schools, like obviously it's a really interesting time that we live in now. Like some of your articles about social media, you
Yeah.
started before social media, well, like when I guess when it was on the cusp of it. So this is an interesting generation for that's what we're in right now.
It is. I mean, I have my wife and I have kids 18 to 24 range, right? So
Yeah.
they're in the throes and they have been
So
in the
they
throes of COVID, pre-COVID, social media, all of that.
so
Um,
then I always find that your kids' generation the most interesting because they were in the midst of social media that and there was no mentorship. Nobody knew what was
no,
going on, right?
not as a parent, certainly not them. You
Yeah.
added COVID on top of it. You added, like I try to say it's like a perfect storm, particularly for a male, but females too. But like you could start to, right, cannabis. You can bet on sports. There's a
Yeah.
lot of influences, and everything became a lot easier and accessible. And so that's a perfect storm for someone who might be isolated or confused or deal with anxiety, whether they're like the most outwardly positive, successful on the outside, they seem pretty happy,
Yeah.
captain of the football team kind of thing. But those things weren't like, or not, they were around in 1998 when I started this to a degree, at least the concept of, mental health, stigma, importance of like physical activity, finding mentors, you know,
Yeah.
um, not comparing yourself to other people, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
Even like myself, I struggle with that probably. Those things still exist today. So it's easy to write about. There's enough. material out there.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, but then yeah, talk about comparing yourself. That's like an epidemic that nobody talks about now. Like that's all that social media is really. It's comparing and contrasting, right? So
100%.
and it's not even true. Everybody just shows the best of themselves, right? Or they just make it up.
It's totally. So if you took a day, I mean, I have a small following of people that read my column. I say small. It's like it's a small group. It's beyond my family. It's definitely some of my friends and a
Yeah,
few others. And what they'd say is like, um, in my weekly column, it's like me, it's self-deprecation. It's me like making fun of myself. It's me talking about my dad a lot or my kids. It's a lot about like what we're what we're not doing well or what we're struggling with. I don't mean like emotional struggle, but
yeah.
like just
You
the flaws
personalize.
of
You
flaws of
personal.
humanity, and we're
Yeah,
like and making light of it and at least trying to not to be flip about it. But I definitely put that out there. And it's like it's hard on the sleeve and everybody knows. And it's like my dad gets a hearing aid and he walks in the shower 3 times. So it just because he forgets and it keeps
yeah,
breaking. And like why does he do that? Um, some of it's sort of funny, some of it
yeah.
is serious. But it's not putting out there this fake persona of everything's great.
Well, so just to go back to your documentary, you personalize your columns, your editorials, and you personalize your film. So that's your grammar. That's your way to do things. So it's like you brought up making documentaries. You watch a whole bunch of them. Sometimes there's a voiceover, there's a fly in the wall kind of approach to it. We're like looking at it from that perspective. Or your film, where like you get inside, you get into you develop relationships, you get personal. I think that's what you do as a writer, so that's what you're going to do as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I couldn't do it any other way. It was sort of I did do an outline. You asked about that.
Yeah,
We pivoted a little.
sure. Well, that's what you do, but as long as you have a structure in place, so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
doesn't then you could adjust the structure, I guess, right? When you're making the film.
You can. Though what I think for me, it's a lot easier to take out paragraphs, quotes, condense, move something in a story, written story, or move things around or change the lead. I mean, that's how I've been trained, and I've been at this for 30 some years, started in the mid 90s. But in the film, that was hard for us because like we were new. We had a $20 software system. Like my
Yeah.
son who can make videos and do podcasts has some of that skill, but like it wasn't easy to just, all right, we're gonna like quickly move this here and um lot more difficult. Anyone who makes movies, I mean, I I applaud them for the skill set you need.
So basically was it people because you interviewed more than a few people and then obviously it culminated with the final person. Did you leave somebody out of the film? Like where did you interview? I'm sure that you interviewed so many people that you couldn't put them in the film.
Oh, good question. Like the day that we did like the run and did the primary interviews, which would have been fall of 2023 now. Definitely talked to a few other people very quickly, but did not leave anybody out. Did talk to one family member, the her father, which was a little bit more informative, but it would have felt forced to have him in there, like in the end. Um, and he was actually the person in this film who let the main character Megan know about this running club. So like that's pretty important. So we just made a mention of that at the end. But no, like I mean, there are people that I've talked to and interviewed over the years about addiction, about recovery, about why people relapse. You and I were talking about that at the beginning here, but that was more to like ground me
Yeah.
in the issues. And also I did have an idea like I was going to include them in the film. Like people I respected who work in the addiction recovery, addiction treatment space. I wanted to have their interviews on in the film. But once I started to learn about this story and the people in it, that was the story. Like I didn't need to bring in like experts into the film and make it like almost like a Dateline 2020 kind of thing, right? It's
Gotcha.
just the human interest piece.
Yeah.
So
Yes, you didn't bring in like a scientist or a doctor to talk about.
I was like, I don't need to do that. This is the and the founder of the film is you know a licensed clinical social worker. You know, that's he did get his training in that. And, you know, he in theory is and his whole idea, and he's not the only one to form this concept of we need to like move our bodies and not be isolated.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, you know, he in theory represented the clinical community and he's also the founder of it. I didn't need to force outside stuff. So
Well, you let the subjects talk. And what I mean by that is that there's like a long running scene that you do with your cell phone in the beginning of the film. The gentleman at the end, like you're letting the subjects kind of tell the story with like long kind of shots, which
yeah.
I found interesting. Like I found it like you're making us emotionally involved in these characters.
Yeah. I don't know if that was a conscious decision. Well, because like, I think when you're writing a or doing a just a general story, you know, you're invariably going to cut. You have space if it's just like say a newspaper or a magazine or radio or TV. They have to cut. Everything is, and I've noticed even in like documentary, everything is a little tighter. Um, I think once like it just felt like we wanted to be different, and we would shortchange their stories. You could think of the film, and I kind of have as like four or five different like individual interviews.
Yeah,
And I know we have a central figure, but it's kind of like four or five interviews, and like you can watch them in bits probably because it is long, overly long. My wife says, "Oh, you could have cut this to an hour," and she's right. In fact, probably could have cut it to 50 minutes. But you know, you know, pride of ownership, and I found it difficult to do that. So that was somewhat intentional over time. We didn't want to shortchange the
but if you, yeah, what your wife was saying, if you wanted like just get it distributed, yeah, that would probably be a good idea, just to really kind of,
get it, yeah,
yeah,
get it
just kind
down.
of like smash it into like an entertaining kind of piece, I guess, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, we could do that or get it to like we are playing with a version that's about an hour. So it's
yeah,
an hour and a half,
yeah,
hour 35. So you know, that's significant cuts, but you can find them. There's definitely things that like I'm like, oh, we could have probably cut that. Had we taken another 6 months, we would have done it. I felt this like I don't know what it was. I'm like, we gotta get this out there uncut just to like see about the interest in it.
yeah.
Uh, which I'm glad I did.
Well, it happens in the film festival circuit all the time, right? Where people submit their films and then they get shown, and then they go back and they start cutting, and then they for a distribution package. It's a very common
Very
thing.
normal.
So
Yeah, new
yeah.
to this.
You see, you just look at the story beats, right? The emotional beats, and then if you see repeated story beats, then that's when you know when the cut. I'm making it more simpler than what it is, but it's
No,
like
that's good.
yeah,
I'll remember that.
yeah, no, but that's basically what you do. Just so you kind of write a whole new script, and then you kind of write a script within the footage, right? So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah.
All right. So did this interview subjects watch the film?
Yeah, I made sure to get approval from the club. Like we weren't, the film wasn't about the running club. It kind of was, but it was sort of
Yeah,
told through their own personal stories. But made sure that the founder of the club and the you know the leadership, there were a couple people, got to view it. I wanted the buy-in there, and then also not for creative changes, but more like, is this reflecting the mission?
yeah,
And then yeah, they actually did a little watch party and didn't have any feedback. I think they maybe had one little suggested edit. Um, and we were good. So before it sent it out.
they like to see themselves on film, right?
I don't know about that, but I they definitely are a very thoughtful bunch. They definitely are willing to share a lot. So
And then you
I
have
don't
a
know if they
romantic story too, right? That you can tie into the film. Well, you did, but I'm saying you can. People are interested in that stuff, right? So
I'm sure you could take like a good friend of ours, very close friends of ours, their father, who I've known for years, his grandson has dealt with addiction or is dealing with it. So he kept saying, when's this going to come out? And he's like, oh, I found it really great, all these different things. But the part about the relationship, oh, you could have cut that because he just that didn't matter to him. But others might see it like, wow, I didn't think someone who's had this past with addiction could have that really kind of relationship, the two of them together. And they found it interesting. So I don't know, you could probably draw different things from it. Someone
yeah.
might resonate more with others.
Well, congratulations on the film. It's your first film. It's like it seems like a
Thanks,
film
man.
school for you, and I'm sure you learned a ton.
Yeah, thank you.
And
I did.
you should learn. You should make another. Definitely make another film. And kind of like I think you found, like I said, I think you found your story kind of grammar where you know what you need to do, right? So it makes you comfortable.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
So
We'll stay
before
in
we leave
touch.
you, I just want to ask you something, a fun question. You on the blog interview, you mentioned that The Natural and Moonstruck are the two films you watched the most times in your life.
Yeah.
So two 80s movies. I just watched Moonstruck literally with my wife 2 weeks ago. Haven't seen it in maybe 20 years. Still
Right.
holds up.
Holds up.
Yeah, it still holds up. And then The Natural, I'm a huge baseball fan, so I obviously watched The Natural. And so
Yeah.
why do those two movies stick out for you?
Um, I have an Italian family, so I'd say Moonstruck fits. There are a lot of iconic moments. Randomly met Johnny Camerari, Danny Aiello in
Yeah.
Hoboken, New Jersey, like with my wife when we were 25 years ago, maybe now, 27 years ago. So I watched it all the way through all the time? No, but different pieces of it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of my family. The Natural is like iconic in every way. So love that film. Yeah.
Have you ever read the book The Natural?
About 10 years ago, someone told me to read it because I kept talking about, oh, it was on Natural's on again on TBS again. So I watched it again last night or part of it. And they're like, you should read the book. So
What did you think?
I,
Because the book's different, right? So he doesn't. They
book's
change
different.
the ending's different. Let's just put it that way.
It's funny, like if you, my son doesn't want to go see Wicked on Broadway, which I've seen a few times and loved it. He loved the movie. He's like, I'm not gonna like the Broadway thing. And I'm like, you might be right. Like the reverse of how um, I like the movie better, The Natural.
Well, because it's a happy ending, right? It's a sad ending, the movie.
Though I would say they could have gone there with the film, like Hoosiers is another, like Hoosiers, it was like they could have of course that was a true story, but like the way they do things in film, like I don't know, they could have ran that play in Hoosiers real time. They slowed it down for Jimmy Chipwood to hit the shot. I'm like, you didn't need to do that. Just run it kind of real time. Like we're watching a real game on TV. Um, but filmmakers, they know what they're doing. I don't.
Well,
Um,
I think it's a Hollywood ending. Like The
it's
Natural
a
is a
Hollywood ending.
Hollywood ending, right?
Yeah, I Roy Hobbs is a good character. So
When you know, like, to give spoiler alert, but in the book that he sells out, like he sells
yeah,
out in the end, right? So he
yeah,
doesn't hit the winning home run. He strikes out. They lose. The manager doesn't go to the World Series. Everybody's
yeah,
sad, right?
yeah. It's just not as good.
Yeah,
I wanted the positive story at the end, I think.
yeah. So that, yeah, but that they made it Hollywood, right?
Mhm.
So basically, obviously, Robert Redford and basically and is the man. And you said in the blog interview, the best line in the movie, the single greatest line in the movie is go pick me out in a winner, Bobby," meaning the dad.
Yeah, I like because the moment is building up and you see it coming, and then it happens with the injury, and he's walking down first base, and he
Yeah,
knew they made the bat. I mean, that line, what did I say? I probably wrote to you. That stands in time. I mean, it's like, and just the way he delivered it. Go pick me out a winner. We know what bat he's going to get.
yeah,
Um, yeah, great scene.
yeah. But
Great scene.
it's the element of like somebody who has got this natural ability, but then loses his mentor.
Yeah.
They go back to your themes, loses his dad, loses his mentor, and kind of like loses his way for a
And then
long time, right?
he had this relationship too. Yeah, the whatever Kirk Gibson moment, obviously for the Dodgers is related, similar.
They
That's
did a
very
whole
much
thing
like,
when the NBC did a whole thing. I don't know if you
oh,
remember.
they connected the two.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Was there a bat boy involved in the Kirk Gibbs? I kind of doubt it, but
No. Tommy
um,
Lasorda was the bad boy.
well, sort of, yeah.
But yeah, totally. And then Moonstruck, like Norman Jewison, Canadian director.
Oh, really?
Nicolas
Okay, I
Cage's
didn't know that.
performance is very interesting, but like I said, the film still holds up. It's still about that Italian family, that kind of like that dysfunctional but also successful family.
Yeah. Yeah. It was more familiar to me
Yeah.
than a lot of films. So
Yeah. All right, man. Well, let's talk again. Hopefully, we can talk again when you make your next film. And I just signed up on your blog, so I'll be getting your
great.
columns, and I'll be reading them with joy in the
Thank
future.
you. This has been a lot of fun and educational too. I learned a few things. So
All
thank you.
right, let's talk again when you make your next film.
Thanks, Matt.